to us about educator prayer groups at school prior to or after school, during lunch, during non-contractual hours. What are the viewpoints of Liberty Institute when it comes to teachers leading a teacher prayer group?
Okay, did everybody hear the question?
Yes.
Okay, so can teachers have after-school prayer groups or Bible studies? Generally speaking, yes. You have the right to have those. Especially if the closer you get to non-instructional time, if I hear the words non-instructional, my instinct is to throw up a big green, one of those big green circles, right? If it's non-instructional. Again, there are always some pitfalls, but generally, and the big one there goes back to that, they have to treat you equally. If they allow other groups to meet after school, other educator-only groups to meet after school, whatever those groups happen to be, if they're non-religious in nature, then they have to allow yours too. Right? Or even if they are religious, if they allow a Muslim prayer group, or a Jewish prayer group, or a Hindu prayer group, whatever it happens to be, they can't deny there being a Bible study or a Christian prayer group. So if there's a myriad of options. I think, if there's an after-school divorce group or something like that, or single teachers group. I know there's no single teachers out there, but if they allow those to exist, then they have to allow an after-school prayer group or Bible study group to exist as well.
Okay, I've got some really good questions, and I know we thought maybe 3, but if you can maybe do brief answers, because these are really good questions. If a principal asks for prayer during our working hours, what is legally appropriate? Can we pray or not?
That's one of those, it depends. I guess okay, so if I got that question, what I would want to know is, what are the circumstances of the principal asking for prayer? Hopefully this is not over the intercom, during the morning announcements. So,
It didn't say.
I mean, is this a principal just approaching somebody whom he or she knows to be as a Christian in the hallway and says, hey, that outpatient procedure I've got on Friday, can you just lift me up in prayer for that? So there's the legal answer, and then there's the kind of, to me it's like, well, hopefully that principal is smart enough to not go to the atheist, in school and ask that. Because that's when they're probably going to be stirring up some trouble, right? But if they go to somebody who they know to be a brother or sister in Christ and ask that, then I'm just like, why on earth would that ever be an issue? Unless, and this is where, going back, in the presence of students, right? That could be certainly a big red flag. And the senior to subordinate issues as well, right? Because if it's a principal and they're asking a subordinate employee, then it needs to be very clear that it's being asked in a personal nature. So that's one where I would basically caution that principal to exercise wisdom, discernment, in the when and the how that they do it, right? And it might be something that they want to ensure that it's truly is a one-on-one situation, not in the principal's office with the principal sitting behind their desk, et cetera,
Okay, here's another question. Are teachers allowed to have Bibles in the classroom library? In our district campus, we have independent reading time in the classroom for about 15 minutes a day. So the question is, can teachers have Bibles in their classroom library?
Classroom library, okay. So that means like just a small collection of books at the back of the room? Okay. That is it depends. That's a great question though. If it is subject matter related, the more subject matter related it is, the more likely it is to be a yes. The harder one is going to be if you're in a math class, although I believe that math is the language of God's creation. That's just my, so. But I don't get to make those rules. The first thing I would say is look at the district policy. Right? What does the district policy say? It may be that district policy is a bad policy and it's problematic, but that's a different fight for a different day. And I would always advise, just go with your district policy for now, unless it's clearly unconstitutional. But if they allow for other similar non-religious books, then they should also allow for religious books. Now, when I say similar non-religious books, that means that if it's a math class and it's a book about explaining Pythagoras' theorem, that's not a similar non-religious book, right? But if it's a book, let's say you're in English class or history class, and you've got books about Nietzsche and Marx, then you're getting a lot more into the similar non-religious.
What about elementary school level?
They're not reading Nietzsche and Marx.
No. Nope, but they do have reading corners.
Yeah, so that would be, here's one kind of a litmus test that I always use. Are religious books permitted in the school library, the big library in the school? We actually had an issue with that out in Houston where the teacher said, you can't have a Bible in my classroom. Well, I looked up the school's online library, which you can do now. I guess it was pretty incredible that sitting all the way in Dallas, I could look up a Houston elementary school's library and see what was in it. And sure enough, they had books about, Moses, about Daniel, about Paul, and so I said, well, if you allow religious books in your school library, how can you not allow them in your classroom library too? And that was in an elementary school scenario. So that would kind of be the fallback response I would give. But again, it goes back to if there are similar non-religious books allowed, then there must also be religious books allowed. Age appropriate and that kind of stuff.
Okay, what exactly can you say if a student asks about your beliefs?
Well, what can you say? I mean, you can say whatever you want. It's the question I assume is really when can you say it, right? When are you allowed to talk about your beliefs? And may you talk about those beliefs? And that's going to come back to is it during instruction? If it's during instructional time, then it can't be disruptive to the instructional environment. If it's during non-instructional time, then it needs to be clear that it is a person-to-person conversation, not I'm giving you the official response of the school, which again sounds ridiculous, but it's almost like you have to put a disclaimer out there, that I'm not telling you this as, your teacher. I'm telling, one of those types of things that, and make sure that it's student initiated. That, I don't necessarily recommend flipping on your phone and recording the conversation just to be safe, but it's almost to the point where you have to do that to prove that the student was the one that approached you. And I would also say exercise extreme caution if you're doing so in the presence of other students, because some other student may interpret that conversation very, very differently. In your mind it may be, well, the student approached me and asked me what my beliefs are, and if somebody asks me, I'm going to share it with them. Another student who's standing there, a third party, as we call a third party witness, may say, well, the teacher just started sharing his or her, religion with that student. They were, proselytizing, which has become a bad word these days. Proselytizing is not a bad word, but that's, how people characterize it and say, well, he was proselytizing, which basically just means sharing your faith.
Okay, next question. As a life school contact, which is what a lot of the people here are for our group, can I offer to pray over the faculty and staff during in-service meetings?
Wow, that's another. That would be one of those, I would need to know all of the circumstances surrounding how you were going to pray for them, You're always, free to pray for them, right? on your own. Now it's how extensively do you communicate the fact that you're going to pray for them, or right, for those who are truly kind of our intercessory prayer warriors, they typically like to know, what can I pray for? What needs do you have that you would like me to pray for?
Here's this question is like at a meeting. Could I pray?
That was my question. Like, we're going to go back to school. We're going to have in-services at our campus. So they start giving us all these things that we need to know and new things going on, and teachers are already stressed and, oh, I got to do this, I got to fix this, and changes and more changes. And so, like, afterwards, like, maybe just pray for everybody, like, in general, that they have a good school year, you know, like a welcome thing, you know, and just kind of ease their, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Oh, not
Yeah.
during the meeting,
No,
after the
after
meeting.
when the principal's done with the in-service, and I can talk to her and tell her, because obviously she knows all the school contact there, and just, you know, get her permission for just to be cordial, right, and get her permission, and then do the, you know, so I guess. that would
Yeah,
be
the
okay.
more non-official it is, so if you're on non-official, you know, if you're during the in-service meeting, even though it's technically not like instructional time, it's still an official school function.
I meant like afterwards.
Yeah, so that becomes more like an after-school,
Okay.
non-school activity type of thing. And I would say you're on much better footing
Yeah.
if it's done in that way, right, where you're waiting until afterwards. That just goes to that, you know, as a term we use, you know, emotional intelligence or emotional IQ, kind of just sensing what and when it's more appropriate than at other times. So,
Thank you.
and if any of these questions that I've answered, if I didn't answer your question adequately, please hunt me down and no, okay, that's an old Marine Corps phrase there. I didn't mean find me and ask me.
Okay, next question. We've only got 2 more. Do we have the right to announce our prayer meetings over the school intercom?
No, that's one I would, unfortunately, I would almost always say no. I mean, I can't think of, I'm trying very quickly to you know, run through all the hypotheticals I can to think of a time when that would be acceptable. I can't think of any, because it's using the school's intercom system, that makes it very, very much like an official, you know, proclamation, endorsement, etc.
Okay.
What if they're announcing science club's meeting at this time, chess club's meeting at this time, prayer meeting at this time? If other clubs are being announced?
Yeah, that's a great observation that, well, why isn't the equal treatment or equal footing, equal terms applied there? And that's just one of those areas where they said because it looks too much like an official endorsement, because you're you know, pronouncing it, and then it implies that students should go, because it's directed at students, saying, you know, here are the great things that we're doing as a school. You should go to them. Whereas if it's after school time, so the other scenario was they have to treat you equally. Those are typically in the non-instructional environment, right, where it's an after-school club. If they allow an after-school chess club, then they have to allow an after-school Bible club as well. Again, because it's non-instructional time. So there's not this sense that the school is somehow telling students or encouraging students they should attend that. If it's during instructional time, which is what I'm assuming the announcement has come is during instructional time, then that's a much stronger case to be made that the school is encouraging students that they should be doing that. And that gets back to that neutrality issue of it's looking more like, hey, we at this school favor religion, and so we want, and so what's going to happen, actually, what that will lead to is you're going to get, if the school did say, well, we just want to be neutral, so we don't want to be hostile towards that, what you're going to find is now the atheist student organization is going to say, well, then you have to announce ours too. And then the satanic group or whatever says, you have to announce ours too. And all of a sudden it's a, you know, it's a free-for-all, and it becomes almost a logistical nightmare.
She wanted to know, so that would also for posting it?
What about posting flyers for your friends?
Yeah, that's almost really the same thing as announcing it on the intercom. Posting flyers, it becomes like just like the school saying, hey, look at this great thing, you should go do this.
Email?
Mr. Barrett, on the educator prayer groups, if this is just given out to teachers, a flyer about this is the prayer group time. And you can call it the JC Club. You know, there's other club names. You name that and use the necessarily prayer group. But can't those flyers go out to individual staff members if they allow other things going into the mailboxes or going handed out to other people?
So this is by staff for staff.
Right, that's
Okay.
what the prayer group is, staff for staff.
I would say, you know, I assume that there's like a kind of a general mailroom type of thing where every
Yes.
teacher's got like a
Yes.
box or whatever. That's, I mean, without knowing any case law off the top of my head that addresses that issue specifically, I would say if they allow other similar non-religious groups to do it, then they should also allow religious groups to do it.
Like,
So,
say for example, the teachers union, they post a flyer, you know, in the teachers lounge, so that's what I was talking about for the prayer group, on like posting it on the refrigerator for the teachers lounge.
yeah, that becomes, I mean, that's different than posting it around the school, because if it's only within the teacher's lounge,
Yeah.
there's no student, it's kind of the employee to employee. When a student's present, remember that was a red flag, because the student hears it, the student thinks the school is now telling me I should believe this or I should do this. But if it's just employee to employee within the lounge, then that's a much better scenario. It's not going to be 100% fail-safe, but it's much, much better, and it would then depend on what their policies are within each district, within each school. If they allow there to be discussion of politics, sports, any type of controversial issue, basically, then they also have to allow equal, equal religious expression. So that's, it's going to depend very much on what that district's policies are when it comes to that. But if they allow you to distribute flyers, advertising for certain, non-religious activities and groups and so on and so forth, then they should also allow for religious expression in the same manner.
At moment of silence is the issue. If a student asks what they're supposed to do during this time, can the teacher response be, this is a time set aside for prayer if you choose to do it? And this is a double question, so answer that and then I'll give you the last part.
I would be very careful about saying this is a time set aside for prayer if you choose to do it, because what happens is they don't hear those last four words, if you choose to do it. They hear this is a time set aside for prayer, and then the implication then becomes, oh, well, we have to pray. Well, then people say, well, no, because they just said if you choose to do it. Well, then the argument the other side uses is, yes, but you make it sound like if you don't pray, it's not as good. It's not that the prayer is really what you want us to do, but if you don't, it's okay. But we kind of like you to pray if you would. Yeah. So I always, and I ran into this issue not in a school setting, but similar with a group that received government funds, and the government and they wanted to have a moment of silence, and so in that scenario they said, you're free. This is a moment of silence. You're free to observe. I don't remember exactly how I phrased it, but basically you're free to observe this moment of silence if you choose to. However, you must be respectful of those who choose to, observe this. If you choose not to pray, or if you choose not to observe the moment of silence, you will not be disruptive of those who do choose to observe it. So basically what they said is you're free to use this time in a manner of your own choosing, but they didn't say, which means you can pray if you want, because that was the step too far. It was just you're free to use this time however you please, but what you cannot do is be disruptive of those who wish to observe a moment of silence. And that was kind of implying if somebody's praying, you're not going to be sitting there, making noises or being disruptive. So that's how I would caution against using that word prayer, and I would just stick to observe the moment of silence, which I know it waters it down, it annoys me, but that's the safest route.
The second part of this is, if a student asks if we believe in God, how should that be answered? Yes, no, we can't talk about that, or other. These are the choices.
If it's during instructional time, I would only answer it if it relates directly to the subject matter. If you're talking about, I would assume this is going to be like on a higher level, high school AP philosophy or whatever,
No, this happens at the elementary level.
Okay.
No, this happens at
So at the elementary level, if it's during instructional time at the elementary level, I would decline to answer at that time and wait until non-instructional, I would say, why don't you ask me again after class? Or after school would even be even better, after school. Because after class, you're still kind of in that twilight zone of instructional and non-instructional. After school, you're much safer. Why don't you ask me after school? Don't say, well, come to church with me this Sunday and I'll tell you the answer.
Michael,